Welcome to this evening's ministry with Pastor David. We gather as sovereign beings under the lawful design of life encoded within each of us. In this sacred space of the Sovereign Systems Institute, we pause to recognize our jurisdiction, our capacity, and our contract with the natural order. May our words and decisions align with the resiliency code and generate sovereign wealth for ourselves and all who will follow the resilient path. Tonight, we're going back to the connection field. 2 weeks ago, we covered the architecture, the 5 characteristics of right relationship, capacity expanding in both directions, clarity over comfort, jurisdictional respect, multi-field alignment, forward momentum. You left that session with a framework, a way of looking at your relationships structurally instead of emotionally. And then you went home and you ran into your spouse, your brother, your oldest friend, your business partner, the colleague you've known for 15 years. And you tried to apply what you'd learned. And something happened that nobody warned you about. The architecture works, and it cost you something real. That's what tonight is about. Because knowing the framework is one thing. Holding it when it breaks a relationship you valued is something else entirely. And most people, when they feel that cost, assume they did something wrong. They collapse back. They abandon the structure to preserve the connection. And in doing so, they lose both. I want to talk about what actually happens when you start applying connection field architecture to your real relationships. Not theoretically, not abstractly, what actually happens. The first thing that happens is people notice you've changed before you tell them anything. You didn't announce it. You didn't make a speech. You just stopped absorbing certain things the way you used to. You stopped laughing at the comment that drains you. You stopped staying in the conversation that goes nowhere. You stopped being available at the times that used to cost you most. And they feel it, and they don't like it. Because here's what you've disrupted. You've disrupted an agreement that was never spoken out loud. Most relationships run on unspoken agreements. I will be available when you need me, regardless of my own capacity. I will tolerate this behavior because the history between us makes confrontation feel disloyal. I will absorb your emotional state because that's what people who care about each other do. You never signed those agreements. Nobody presented them to you, but you've been honoring them for years, decades. When you stop honoring them, the other person experiences it as a violation, even though the agreement was never legitimate, even though you never actually consented to it, even though it was costing you capacity you couldn't afford to keep losing. They feel it as betrayal, and they will tell you so. That's the first test. The second thing that happens is the people who claim to support you become the loudest voices against your structural decisions. Not strangers, not acquaintances, the people closest to you. Your spouse says you've become cold. Your family says you're being selfish. Your oldest friends say you used to be more fun. Your colleagues say you've changed and they don't mean it as a compliment. And the reason this hits harder than it should is because you know these people love you. You know their concern is real on some level. You know their history with you matters. But here's what you have to hold simultaneously, and this is the hard part. Their love for you is real, and their reaction to your structural integrity is about them, not you. Both of those things are true at the same time. The love is real. The resistance is also real. And the resistance isn't evidence that you're wrong. It's evidence that your structural change is revealing what their comfort required from you. That's the second test. Can you hold both truths at once without collapsing either one? The third thing that happens is the loneliness. And I want to be honest about this because most ministry on connection field glosses over it. When you apply right relationship architecture to your actual life, there is a gap, a real one, between letting go of connections that couldn't hold structure and finding connections that can. That gap is uncomfortable in a way that's hard to describe. You're not isolated. You still have people around you, but something has shifted, and the connections that used to fill a certain space no longer fit. And the connections that could fill it haven't arrived yet. That gap is where most people collapse back. Not because the architecture is wrong, because the loneliness in the middle feels like evidence that the architecture is wrong. It's not. It's the price of structural transition, and it's temporary. But you have to know it's coming, or it will break you at exactly the wrong moment. I've been in that gap more than once. After restructuring relationships I'd built entire chapters of my life around. After choosing structural integrity over comfortable extraction. After deciding that what I was building required a connection field that could actually hold it. The gap is real, and it's so worth it. But you have to walk through it, not around it. Here's what I've learned about holding connection field architecture when it costs you something. You don't hold it by being certain. You hold it by being clear. Certainty says, I know this is right and I have no doubt. Clarity says, I can see what this relationship actually is, and I can see what I'm building, and I can see that they don't coexist the way this relationship is currently structured. Certainty is fragile. It depends on everything going smoothly. Clarity holds under pressure because it's based on what you can actually observe, not on how you feel about it. When your family pushes back on your structural decisions, you don't need to be certain you're right. You need to be clear about what you can see, what the pattern has been, what it's been costing, what you're building that requires the capacity that pattern has been consuming. Clarity doesn't require their agreement. It doesn't require their understanding. It doesn't require them to admit what's been happening. It just requires you to see it honestly and act accordingly. That's holding the architecture. Now, I want to talk about something that comes up constantly when people start applying connection field structure honestly: the guilt. Because the moment you start protecting your capacity in relationships, the moment you start saying no to patterns that have been draining you, the moment you start restructuring connections that aren't aligned, somebody is going to make you feel guilty about it. And they're going to use your own values against you. They're going to say, I thought you believed in loyalty. They're going to say, family doesn't abandon each other. They're going to say, after everything we've been through together, this is how you treat me? And every one of those statements is designed to do one thing: activate your guilt reflex and pull you back into the connection on their terms, not yours. Here's the structural response to guilt being used as leverage in a relationship. Guilt is a valid signal when it points to an actual violation. When you've genuinely crossed someone's jurisdiction, when you've taken more than you've given, when you've failed a legitimate obligation. Guilt is a manipulation tool when it's activated by someone who needs you to keep serving a function you never agreed to serve. The question to ask is, what obligation am I actually violating here? not what obligation they're claiming I'm violating. What obligation did I actually consent to that I'm actually failing? Most of the time, when you ask that question honestly, the answer is nothing. You're violating an unspoken agreement you never made. You're failing a role you were assigned without your consent. And recognizing that doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you structurally honest. Here's what right relationship looks like when it's actually right. When you make structural decisions that cost something, the people who are in right relationship with you respond with curiosity, not accusation. They say, help me understand what you're navigating. They say, what do you need right now? They say, I don't entirely understand this, but I trust that you do. They don't require your collapse to maintain their comfort. They don't need you available in ways that drain you. They don't weaponize your values against your structural decisions. And when you find people who respond that way, you'll understand immediately why the architecture was so worth holding. Because right relationship under pressure is the most generative thing that exists in the connection field. Not relationship in comfortable times. Any connection can feel right when nothing's being tested. Right relationship under pressure. When you're making hard decisions and they hold with you instead of against you. When the architecture gets tested and the connection survives it. That's what you're building toward. Here's the resilient path through this. Pause. When you feel the pushback, recognize what's actually happening. Someone is reacting to your structural integrity. That reaction is data about the connection. It's not evidence that you're wrong. It's not a signal to collapse back. It's information about what that relationship was actually built on. Sit with that information before you respond. Don't react to the guilt. Don't negotiate your structure to manage their discomfort. Pause and read the signal clearly. Prepare. Know the cost before you pay it. Right relationship architecture has a price. There will be a gap. There will be loneliness in the transition. There will be people who interpret your structural clarity as rejection. Prepare for that, not by bracing emotionally, by understanding structurally that the discomfort is part of the process, not evidence against it. Participate. Hold the architecture in the actual moment, not abstractly, not in principle, in the real conversation with the real person in front of you who is pushing back on your structural decisions. Hold clarity over comfort. Maintain jurisdictional integrity. Let the connection reveal what it's actually built on. And invest deeply in the connections that can hold structure, because those are rare and priceless. When you find them, they deserve everything you've got. The connection field architecture we covered 2 weeks ago is sound. Tonight's reality is that applying it costs something. The relationships that can't survive your structural integrity were never what you thought they were. The relationships that survive it become the foundation everything else is built on. Collapse is optional, but it requires a connection field that can hold what you're building, not just what you used to be. Hold the architecture, pay the price. It's worth it. Find out which connections were real. That's the work. I'll now close our ministry for this evening. Having prepared through this fellowship, we return to participate from our individual sovereignty, carrying the coherence generated here into our respective fields, in service to the lawful design of life, and the continuation of this work. Next week, the resource field, the channels of flow. Take care, everyone.